Yeah, she's in the middle.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a confession to make. I have a secret vice.
Could be.
Now, it's not drinking or smoking, it's not greed or lust, but I stand in supermarket checkout lines and read the headlines in the tabloid newspapers.
Oh, everybody does that.
I enjoy a certain unrestrained fascination in the scoops of the Globe
Of course. Oh,
and the National Enquirer. Now, my fascination does not extend to paying for those publications,
oh no.
but I do enjoy the headlines. I have a love affair with the power of words, and the tabloid reporters are experts in the use of words to draw people in. Tabloids have dragged the art of writing headlines to new depths. Boy is born with 8-foot tongue. Elvis and Adolf Hitler shared secret CIA condo. And poor Meghan Markle at war with the royals.
Oh, yeah.
The punchiness of the words and the shock value is what attracts us. The mixture of plausibility and the absurd. The power of words, for good or evil. A tabloid reporter would have loved to record the events in today's gospel reading. First century supermarket patrons would have been drawn in by the headlines. I'm cured. And in smaller print they would read, Nazarene spits and says magic word. There would be a full color photo of the miracle's recipients with instructions to turn to page 2 for the full story. Gossip, drama, miracle. This is the stuff of tabloid reporting. There is, however, a catch. Jesus does not want this story in the tabloids, or anywhere else for that matter. This is not the first time, nor will it be the last, when Jesus asks the people to keep quiet about a miracle. It does no good. Mark reports the more he ordered them to tell no one, the more zealously they proclaimed the miracle. It is a fact of human psychology. Ask people not to tell, and they're going to tell everyone.
That's right.
Don't tell anyone else, but... Michael was trying really hard to keep his leaving quiet until late in August, but he told his choir. And by mid-July, the whole church knew that Michael was leaving. When we look at the miracles of Jesus, we find that he does not want to create a sensation for the sake of sensationalism. He doesn't want people to absorb the headlines and miss the only news that really counts, the good news. He wants them to view each sign as one more indication that the kingdom of God is at hand. Jesus' miracles are neither clever advertising nor amazing carnival tricks. They are a means of showing forth the gospel. The prophet said that when Messiah came, the deaf would hear, the dumb would speak, the lame would walk, and demons would be cast out. Jesus did all these things to show people who he was and to open their ears and their hearts to his teaching. It's upstairs now. Upstairs. Somebody want to show them where the new nursery is? Because we moved it since they've been here. Thank you.
All right.
Although Jesus wants to avoid publicity, that desire does not keep him from healing this deaf man. Mark says they brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment to his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. Off in private, away from the omnipresent crowds, Jesus touches this man. This is not a sterile, clinically correct medical procedure. It involves touching, spitting, putting his fingers inside the man's ears, and laying his fingers on the man's tongue. And then Jesus speaks a word in Aramaic, Ephphatha, which means be opened. Now, the gospel accounts rarely record the actual Aramaic words that Jesus spoke. And that leads me to believe that when they do, there's some special meaning to be found in those words. They are words of instruction, words of command, and words of power. Jesus referenced to God as Abba, meaning father or daddy. A new way of addressing God that was close and familial and comforting. Jesus' command to the young girl bringing her back from death, Talitha kum, little girl, arise. Words of power and command that she must obey. And Jesus' words from the cross, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? Prophetic words of pain, but also of power and fulfillment. So what do we find in this Aramaic word, Ephphatha, spoken to a deaf man to open his ears and loosen his tongue? Ephphatha. The word is like a cool breeze. It's a word of power and yet also of love and of caring. It opens the man's ears and releases his tongue and allows him to speak the truth plainly. On one level, it is a word spoken to one man, private and specific. On another level, it has meaning far beyond itself and reaching to each of us. Over the last century, we've come better to understand that hearing and speaking are two parts of one whole. If one cannot hear, one's ability to speak is also greatly impaired. There was some understanding of this in Martin Luther's day, for he said about this miracle, Christ begins his cure with the ears and acts in accordance with nature, since from hearing, speaking comes. Helen Keller and her teacher Anne Sullivan gave us a much greater understanding of that connection than we previously had. This is true in a literal physical sense, but it's also true in a deeper spiritual sense. Are not many of us deaf and impeded in our speech when it comes to God? We find ourselves asking others, what do you say when someone dies? Or when a child develops cancer? Or when your husband is diagnosed with MS? We find ourselves unable to hear God's voice and therefore unable to speak words of love and comfort and witness to God's power. Could that be because we are not open? We're not hearing, or perhaps we hear, but we don't really listen. How often do we not really listen when someone is talking to us? President Franklin D. Roosevelt got tired of smiling that big smile and saying the usual things in those White House reception lines. So one evening he decided to find out whether anybody was paying attention to what he was saying. As each person came up to him with their extended hand, he flashed a big smile and said, "I murdered my grandmother this morning." And people would just automatically respond with comments like, "How lovely," or "Keep up the good work, Mr. President."
Good word.
Nobody was really listening to what he was saying, except for one foreign diplomat. When the president said, "I murdered my grandmother this morning," the diplomat replied softly, "I'm sure she had it coming." How often do we fail to really listen How often do we fail to listen to God? How often do we not take time out to hear what God is trying to say to us? We don't pray. We don't meditate. We don't open our hearts to God. We seem to find time for everything else, even on Sunday, when the stores are open and our kids have sports and activities, and we're all just too busy. Something is wrong with the rhythm of our lives when there is no time for quiet contemplation, for rest and prayer. Time to speak and to listen for God. Time to go off alone with Jesus and hear his word of power. Ephphatha. Be opened. The early Christian writer Jesus said, most people can both hear and speak, but how great and how common is spiritual deafness and dumbness. And Bauer said, how many are still deaf and dumb to the kingdom of God. The word of Jesus spoken to the deaf and dumb man in private is also a word spoken to us. Ephphatha, be opened. Hear and listen. Know the power of God. Schleiermacher, another early theologian and Bible scholar, wrote, what a great and wonderful word is this, be opened, which the Redeemer was ever speaking throughout his whole manifestation, and the influences of which have never ceased, but will go on until the whole race of mankind have come to the hearing and knowledge of his salvation, and their tongues shall be loosed to the praise of the Most High God. We all need to spend some time away from the crowds, far from the publicity, having our deaf ears opened and our speech impediments removed. If we can begin to listen in caring, intentional ways, we just might hear God speaking. It might sound strange to us at first. It might just be a still, small voice, difficult to recognize, not quite what we expected. I know all about God saying things that we don't quite expect. But if we wait and listen, the beauty and the healing will come. The gospel is speaking its message of life among us. When our words fail, Jesus stays with us, blowing a cool breeze between earth and heaven. Ephphatha, be opened. If we take time to listen and to hear, we may begin to know more fully that gift of words that is part of what Jesus offers us when he tells us the kingdom of God has come near to you. Amen.
Amen.
If you've never heard Jesus calling you, and if you've never